Leonin Arbiter. I am kind of associated with this card. I've played the card a lot on my channel, made a lot of videos about it. People know I played it a lot during like the heyday of Modern being a competitive format in the UK. And there's a few people that know me from a story at a GP, because a few people saw it happen, and it's a pretty... I love it. It's one of my favourite examples of Leonin Arbiter. Also, making sure you know what your opponent's cards do, don't just assume. So let me take you on an adventure with a storytime video where I explain to you the time that I got a Scape Shift player so good that judges and multiple other competitive players still to this day say, aren't you the Leonin Arbiter guy? This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Use the link in the description below to get 5% off your order and to help support the show, or the code KENOBI at checkout for 5% off your order. The year is 2016. I am young, I am sprightly, I am a young YouTuber in many ways. My channel's not listed off, I'm still working my shit part-time job at the bank, but I spend some of my money, my hard-earned cash that isn't part of this business, to travel to Bologna, across the channel to Italy to play in a Modern GP. To set the stage, this was when Eldrazi Winter was at its peak. I had played so much Modern on Modo over that period of time to learn the matchup, to make sure that the way I was skewing my green-white Death and Taxes deck meant I could beat Eldrazi. This isn't part of the story, but long story short, I failed miserably. I lost a game to Affinity and then fell into a bracket where I just didn't play Eldrazi. I played one Eldrazi opponent in round 8, someone who told me that Basilisk card I gave first strike because they were playing a French copy. I knew it didn't. And I told him it didn't, and it was kind of an awkward conversation because I felt they were trying to scum me. Minor cheating story about language barriers. Let's get back to the main story about language barriers. That's not cheating, but still makes me laugh to this day. So it's round 2 or 3, and I think I'm currently X&O. I haven't lost a round yet, and I come up against an opponent who, nice gentleman, he is French. I remember being French because his accent was very, very thick. I won't do an impression of it this video, but it was very thick. He spoke pretty good English though, and we conversed in English, which is always great, because as an Englishman, I'm painfully ignorant of everyone else around me. As a kid, I thought learning languages in school was not necessary. The only class I really misbehaved in at school was German and French, and now I think, young Vince, you are a twat. So we sit down, shuffle up, I draw my opening 7, I look at my hand, and in my hand is an Obstinate Baloth. This is not a card on my main deck, this is a sideboard card. I believe at the time it's Jund and Reality Smasher, so I could path them, trigger the Reality Smasher and put Obstinate Baloth into play. I have failed to unsideboard in rounds 1 or 2, so I call a judge and I immediately get a game loss. That's right, the Obstinate Baloth gives me a game loss. Essentially, I had not taken one of my cards from my 15 card sideboard, I put it back there and reset my deck to its original 60 card composition, and thus, the reward for the time was a game loss. I call the judge on myself as well. I want to make sure that, you know, if this was discovered during the game and it happened later in the tournament, people would think it was a pattern, that it was cheating. It was just an honest mistake, and I was punished for it. So now I'm 0-1 going up against my opponent. I don't know what they're on. We go to a game 2, and I believe it's pre-board or post-board. I can't remember which board it is. It doesn't matter. We don't know what each of us are on. On turn 2, I cast a Leonin Arbiter. Leonin Arbiter is a 2-mana 2/2 cat cleric creature. At the time, only printed in Scars of Mirrodin. It says players can't search libraries. Any player may pay 2 for that player to ignore this effect until end of turn. So in essence, you can search a library as long as you pay 2 to do so. It doesn't use the stack, so you can just pay this at any time. It's an interesting ability. It really catches people out on Modo because you go to search the library and get caught for it. It can happen in paper. I've had opponents pick up their library to look without me being able to stop them, and I've been like, oh, you can't actually look. And at that point, if you call a judge, they will usually rule, at least in my experience, that they've already began searching, shouldn't have searched. They'll get like a warning. It won't hurt them significantly, but they've failed to find because they didn't pay the 2. What you really want to do is do it so that people have to pay the 2 to set back their game plan, or when effects would make them search, like their own effects, or yours, like Ghost Court and Path to Exile, they can't search because you're doing them when they're tapped out. I've played my Leonin Arbiter, and in all fairness, I believe it's either German, Chinese, or Korean. I own a lot of Leonin Arbiters. I've been sent them over the years, I buy them. I love this card. It's one of my favourite magic cards of all time. We call him Cat Jesus here on the channel, because he saves us from the sins of modern mana bases. Well, at least until Modern Horizons came out and made the card basically still unplayable because I think it's too good now. So I play this card that is complicated. It's got an interesting rules interaction. And my opponent had so far played maybe a Coldly Heart Gardener or a Farseek or something, so I'm pretty sure they're on some variant of Scape Shift. This card is quite good into Scape Shift if they don't have the removal to get rid of it before they have to start searching with Scape Shift or Titan. I ask my opponent, I hold the card up, I ask, does it resolve? Do you understand what this card does? And my opponent says, oui, yes, yes. I'm not going to do the accent, don't do the accent, Vince. He says, yes, yes, yes. I'm like, okay, are you sure? Yes. And I place it down into play, it's in play, he's told me he knows what it does. He's natively a French speaker. I'm natively an English speaker. We're playing a game in English, and my card may be in German or Chinese or Korean, maybe might have even been my English copies. The point is, in Europe at least, when you go to a lot of GPs, you procure a lot of foreign cards. Like I said earlier in the video, I almost got scammed by someone telling me their French copy of Basilisk Collar gave first strike. Well, it doesn't. Here it is on screen right now. It doesn't give first strike. They're fucking lying. Anyway, my opponent proceeds to get to around 5 lands. It's a turn where they could have paid for Arbiters, how I remember it. They cast an Explore, perhaps, another 2 mana spell that gives you a land drop or an untapped land. They play another land, they back up to 4 mana, and then they cast Scapeshift. I think at this point the reason they were casting Scapeshift was because it was in this. I'm bad with Scapeshift math, but it was going to be the point where Scapeshift would get Valakut and be able to hit us. Regardless of what the exact math was, he did it in a way that would tap him out and not leave floating mana, and he went and grabbed a Valakut and he got 5 or 6 lands. We'd had a bit of a back and forth at this point, I remember. What this does, it allows Valakut to trigger and shoot something for 3 damage. Hell, the Explore might have been before the Scapeshift, and they were going to play a land after the Scapeshift resolved. There was something that was going to give them multiple bolts to clear my board. I may have had a Thalia in play and an Arbiter. The exact story eludes me, but there was an Arbiter in play and they're casting Scapeshift and they don't have the ability to pay for it. So my opponent picks up his deck and I stop it before he can look. I don't want to go and get a game warning or game loss because the cards that I'm playing. I say, I'm afraid you cannot search. You have not paid the 2. He is quite upset about this. He looks at the card, he reads it, we have a conversation about it, he's nodding, he understands what's happened. He's more annoyed that he's punted. He's made a mistake. He's just forgot about the Arbiter on board because he's probably playing in multiple languages. Half his cards probably aren't even English as well. Yeah, it's an interesting time. Anyway, his Scapeshift resolves doing nothing. He sacked all his lands. He has no lands in play anymore. Oh, that's the important point here, by the way. Scapeshift sacks all your lands, or allows you to sack all your lands. So they've cast a Scapeshift. They've sacked all 6 or 7 or whatever number of lands they've got. They've gone to search. They failed to find because the Arbiter says no, and they have no lands left. They actually, if I remember correctly, proceed to play land, maybe have some interaction and resolve another Titan, and the Titan can't search, and they realise this. They play it on board as a 6/6 blocker, and they die. The game goes a lot longer than it probably should have done due to some interaction killing some of my threats and I had a slow clock, but it ends up with them sacking all our lands, getting back up to Titan mana, playing a 6/6 Primeval Titan, and dying to my 2/2s anyway. Okay, it's game 3 time. I have got a match loss. They've punted it to high heaven. We're now 1-on-1. It's all to play for to go on to the undefeated bracket into round 3 or 4. Again, this was like fucking a millennia ago, so I don't remember all the detail. So, of course, I play a Leonin Arbiter on turn 2 or turn 3 out of my hand. I ask him with a bit of a smile, you know what this does. I think he laughs and smiles and says, yeah, I do know what it does. The game goes on a bit further and I cast a second Arbiter. Now at this point, there's some information here that I don't have to give my opponent, and it's part of like learning and understanding Magic. When there are 2 Arbiters in play, the effect is not like, it's not like a redundant effect, they are like stacked up. So in order to search your library, there's 2 separate instances of needing to pay 2. I ask my opponent again, do you understand what this card is? And they say yes. They say oui, yes. I have a sneaking suspicion they haven't understood that both of them stack, but I don't have to tell them that. If I've cast 2 other cards, let's say Eidolon the Great Revels. Eidolon the Great Revels has 2 instances of the same text, and they both trigger. But when I cast an Eidolon the Great Revels, I don't need to tell my opponent in a competitive tournament, in a GP level event, that it will ping them twice if they cast a 3-mana spell. If they do that and they get shot for 4 damage and die, that's on them. Bear in mind, if I wasn't at a GP, maybe the side event of the GP or an FNM, I would explain to my opponent. I've played Leonin Arbiter, not in recent years, but back in the day, a ton at modern events too, at FNM and similar, and I would explain to my opponent what it does. I would still try and blow up their lands and just completely fuck with their game plan, but I won't just like scum them. I say scum them. I won't just catch them out. But this is a GP. I'm not going to tell my opponent how my 2 effects stack. So the game goes on, some land drops are made, I'm hitting them with a couple of 2/2s, maybe a 3/1 in the air, and eventually my opponent gets the 6 mana. They pay 2, they tap all their lands, they pay 2 into the first cat, you can see what's coming, right? They cast Scapeshift, they sack all of their lands. I'm sat there staring blank-faced at them, trying not to smile. There is a judge watching, by the way, because obviously I've had an infraction earlier, and also this game's gone a long time. I think the second game went a lot longer than it should have because I blew up all their lands inadvertently, so we've got a judge watching, and some dudes that I recognise from my plane over there, British players. They're hanging around behind as well, just watching, and they can see what's happening. I think the exclamation by my opponent during round 2 when he punted the game was so loud that it draws some attention, so people finish games to come see what's going on. So in game 3, they've paid for 1 cat, they cast a Scapeshift, they sack 6 or 7 lands, they go to pick up their library, and I stop them. I'm like, I'm sorry, you need to pay the two. My opponent looks puzzled, and then it suddenly clicks. There are 2 copies of Arbiter, so there's 2 copies of the effect. It's actually quite intuitive when you say it out loud. My opponent sacked all of their lands. They are fucked. I've got like actual clocks. I remember the third game went a lot quicker than the second. The judge that is watching, I think actually we called a judge over about the scape shift effect earlier. He wanted to just double check that was how the interaction works. So a judge has been called to this good game twice already. The judge who is watching walks away because they start to laugh. They can't laugh at this stuff, right? The players watching from England are laughing as well. People are laughing around. And my opponent, this is what I remember as well, my opponent is such a good sport about it. He is absolutely tilted, but he just starts to laugh. He is just like, oh, I fucked this royally. We end up me winning the game with my opponent just casting Scape Shift into fucking Leonin Arbiters, and I love it. It's one of those moments that I will never forget, and well, I forget most of the details, but it ingrained Leonin Arbiters as one of my favourite Magic cards of all time. And my favourite bit about all of this, that all happened, I walked away, I told my friends that were there, Chris, Teo, Ed, we were staying in a house in Bologna for this GP, lads tour away, it was great. I told them the story, and we laughed about it, and it became a bit of a thing of my opponent, of my teammates, my friends from the event, all just like, joking about Leonin Arbiters and Scape Shifts for the rest of the weekend. But the best bit is I get back to England, I get off my plane, I go through customs and passports and get my bag, and I get on the little shuttle bus to go out to my car in the car park, and there's 3 dudes sat in the bus with me who look like Magic players. And they're the guys who were stood behind laughing at the Arbiter stuff before. Those 3 players are laughing to each other, and then one of them leans over and says, dude, are you the Leonin Arbiter guy? And I'm like, at that point, it's like my first taste of like Magic, not fame, but like infamy perhaps, and I'm like, yeah, that was me. And they start laughing, and one of them like just is, I think he high fives me, maybe fist bumps me, just says it was very funny, and very unfortunate for my opponent too. And that's it. It's not an elaborate story, it's not a cheating story, no one's really angry. My opponent punted their way into Leonin Arbiter multiple times, and let's be honest, we've all done it. As a little added story, I still remember the first time I saw a Leonin Arbiter. I was playing Treasure Cruise Delver when Treasure Cruise was legal in Modern. It's my first big Modern deck. I was at a side event, an Axion event in the school they used to hold events in, and the UK players who played in that school over near Milton Keynes, they'll know what I'm talking about. And I'm playing against a dude from Bournemouth called Sean, who I believe owns a store down there, so shout out to Sean as well. And he vials in a Leonin Arbiter in response to my Scalding Tarn crack. I don't have the mana to pay, I pick it up, he explains the interaction, I immediately kind of get it, and I am just floored by how brutal Leonin Arbiter can be when you're trying to crack fetch lands. They got a Violon too. Anyway, that's Cat Jesus. I love the card. I need to play it some more on the channel at some point soon because it is just hands down top 5. It's up there with Flicker Wisp and Thalia, Stoneforge, and sort of Fire and Ice, with favourite cards ever made for Modern. Let me know if you've ever been got by Leonin Arbiter or a similar hate effect out of nowhere, or you just didn't read it or really understand it. I'd love to hear your stories in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget you can sign up to my Patreon, link down below if you want to help support the channel, and of course CoolStuffInc.com sponsored this video. Use the link in the description below to get 5% off your order and to support the show. And with that, I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.